All right. Go ahead and call to order the USD 49 Board of Education Board meeting for Monday, February 11th, 2019. First thing is the approval of the agenda. Have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Adams, second by Board Member O'Borney. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. Next is audience participation. Do we have anybody in the audience that would like to speak at this time? All right, moving on. Communications from other organizations. The first is the Roosevelt Elementary School Site Council report.
Good evening. Mandy, I promise this is Roosevelt purple, not K-State purple. Just clarifying for the record. Hi guys, for those of you I haven't had the privilege of meeting yet, I'm Paula Rice. I am the principal at Roosevelt. Going to go through some slides really quick. I apologize in advance. There's a lot of information on the slides. My professors raised me right where you don't put a lot of stuff up there. But there's a lot of information, and I didn't want to insult anybody's intelligence by reading it to you, so it's up there for you to read while I talk at you. Sound like a plan? All right, hopefully this clicker thing will work. Here we go. There we go. Okay, so as you can tell, Roosevelt staffing, we're the same section as Roosevelt, or as Wilson and O'Loughlin. I've got 3 sections of each currently. But up to any given day, I can have up to 88 staff members in the building. Not all of them, matter of fact, a good chunk of them are not there full time. I have a ton of ancillary and support staff in the building, and they are all incredibly appreciated. This is just to simply show you that my philosophy, old school, that it takes a village to raise a child, absolutely stands true. I couldn't do it without these guys. None of us could. They're amazing. Current enrollment. Out of 432 available seats, we have 416 filled. I'm at 96% capacity at this point. You'll see down there that the ECSC is at Roosevelt this year. They couldn't be housed at Washington, and they will be moving to Oak Park next year. So their numbers aren't technically figured into my counts. If they were, then I'd be just barely under where I need to be. But right now I've got 10 open seats. You will notice, please, that we are officially over our cap by 1 in kindergarten and by 2 in 2nd grade. Next year's projections. We've sent out pre-enrollment forms and have either received forms back from all of our families or have been in contact with all of our families. And so far, on the 11th day of February, before kindergarten roundup, before enrollment, I'm at 91% capacity for next year. That, of course, again, does not include the ECSC moving to Oak Park. I've got 392 seats estimated filled, over by 2 in 1st grade, projected for next year. And this is only with returning students, siblings of returning students, and employees' children. This is no out-of-district folks at all factored in. Out of 69 available seats for kindergarten, right now I'm estimating only 26 available for placement next year. We had 91 requests for Roosevelt as the first school of choice last year. That would have been enough to open up a 4th section, if not a 5th section, if we'd have wanted to get numbers down a little bit. So we're getting full. I kind of talked about my staff. I like to brag on my staff. My students are everything, but we are a school and we teach everybody, not just kids. We are constantly learning, we are constantly growing, and we try really hard to project to the kids through our actions that learning is a lifelong habit. I've got 4 teachers currently completing their reading recovery certification, meaning they're taking full-time college hours on top of working their full-time jobs. I've got 3 teachers completing their national boards, which is a huge undertaking. I've got 2 SPED teachers currently on waivers to be certified with low incidence kids, and 1 classified staff, very happily pictured, who just received her teaching license. So far this year, we've got 4 student teachers and 14 teacher interns. I just received an email this afternoon with 6 more on the way. So we are constantly trying to learn and grow and develop ourselves as adults as well as the students. Like the other schools in the district, we are working on foundations and our positive behavior intervention supports by intentionally focusing on the 3-to-1 ratio, 3 positives to every corrective. This is a good reminder for us as the adults. I had a former principal call it money in the bank. You want to make sure you have a positive balance, the 3, before you have to make that withdraw, the 1, so that you don't overdraw. One of the ways we do this is we are champs in the hallways, champs in the cafeteria, champs in the auditorium, things like that. And CHAMPS is an acronym for conversation, help, action, movement, participation, and success. And it's designed to help kids know what is expected of them. So rather than saying, we're in the hallway, shh, stop that, knock it off, be quiet, it's, we're in the hallway, our conversation level is an expected 0. They know what's expected. Or we can ask them questions, what is our conversation level? And they can tell us. It's really a great way to internalize the behavior, and it has amazing effects. Speaking of foundations, I'm very proud to show you this is my foundations team, aptly named the BEEP team, because Roadrunners say beep beep. But they did not choose that acronym lightly. When they named themselves the BEEP team again on the idea that we are constantly lifelong learners. Our job is to create a better environment for educating people, not just little people. So our goal is every time somebody new comes into the building, we want them to leave having learned something. Our staff was taken through by the foundations team last year in developing our guidelines for success, kind of our guiding principles. They came up with respectful, honest, compassionate, independent, and motivated. And if you are all of those things, then you are a Roadrunner. We started the year by teaching the kids what these were, giving them golden tickets and tangible rewards. That stopped at semester, and I'm happy to report that the kids have internalized it so well that I had one over Christmas break. Mom sent me a picture where she had written all 5 and drawn pictures of all 5 guidelines and hung them up on the refrigerator, and then proudly exclaimed to her mother the next morning, "Mom, these are the guidelines for success. You have to do them." We were so proud of her. Going into KISA year 2, do have a pretty good site council. We are still trying to diversify it a little bit more, but it's growing on us. This is a great group of folks that meet at least once a semester. They are very, very eager to help us down the road as we work towards our KISA goals. My building leadership team, I have representative from every grade, 2 from special education, 1 representing specials classes, 1 for classified, and then our district leadership team representative as well. They have been instrumental in helping us get through this goal setting process, helping us break down data, really looking at perception data, looking at attendance data, looking at just all the little intricacies. And there's so much. We had a hard time actually choosing what data we wanted to use to move going forward. But we did finally come up with a school improvement plan focused around the district goals, relationships, and relevance. We are going to set a relationship goal of building the relationships within our community to strengthen the networks of our students. We feel like it's really important that they leave us realizing that there is a whole world of people out there, and all they have to do is access it as quickly and as easily as they access the internet. We also want them to realize that real world application, what they learn in school, is more than just the math and the science and the reading. It's actually applicable to everything they will do for the rest of their lives. So our goal is to kind of combine those two and be more intentional about the great things we're already doing, helping them move forward. And we are doing some really great things. We're already working on our community partnerships. We are already doing personalized learning. We're already doing these things. We just never really paid attention to how well we were doing them until walking through the KISA process. And now that we've identified some of the great things we're already doing, we can be more intentional and put heart and soul into it and step it up a little bit more. and just make it that much more relevant and more meaningful to the kids. We're trying really hard to kind of think outside the box a little bit. Not your typical come to school, sit in a desk, copy and read out of the textbook. On the right, you'll notice there are some kiddos, and this is just one classroom. Several teachers are doing it, and several teachers are doing it district-wide. This teacher took a leap of faith in December and lowered 2 of her tables all the way down. She's got rolly chairs and accordion chairs, and they can sit on the floor, they can stand, they can sit on these really cool laptop desk things that they sit on the floor, and it gives them a little platform. It has been amazing. She is a happier teacher, and the kids are happier and more productive, and I don't think she's had maybe one very, very, very minor discipline issue since then. It's been absolutely overwhelming, the change it's made. And we kind of get a little crazy at Roosevelt. We had a wedding in kindergarten, a full-fledged wedding, complete with a bride and a groom, a ceremony, and wedding cake. That is Q marrying you. They will be together forever in every word going forward, as long as Q is leading. We are incredibly blessed at Roosevelt to have an amazing, amazing relationship with our parents. We've got a very strong home and school foundation, and they help kind of bridge the gap between parents. The parent-teacher communication at Roosevelt absolutely blows my mind every day. The relationships that the parents and the teachers form, moving through that as a community to get the kids where they need to go, is incredible. But this group of folks works extra hard to tie everything in. Granted, it's all through the fun things and the fundraisers and things like that. But again, through actions, they brought in sponsors from all over the community to help with Fun Night. Our Fun Night volunteers, it takes about 130 folks to run Fun Night. Almost all of them were outside volunteers. Fort Hays football team, one of the sororities, Hays High volunteers. We had a couple of local churches come in. We even had a TMP Marian kiddo come over and volunteer to help us, and that was awesome. They also try to lead through actions and made a donation of $1,000 to the Ark Park as well. And I had to do it. I asked our families at Fun Night. I put out a couple of pieces of paper and said, hey guys, I'm presenting to the board on February 11th. What would you like them to know about us? And this is what they responded. And overwhelmingly, almost all of them said that it is the teachers, it is the staff, it is the relationships at Roosevelt that make it such a great place to be. And I believe it wholeheartedly. This is an incredible group of people doing an incredible job to educate every child, every day.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Next is included in our packet is the Early Childhood Connections 2017 through 2019 annual report.
It should just be 28.
I was going to say 2018 through 2019 annual report. And then moving on to school spotlights.
We do have a couple. I'd like to end up thanking the KNEA Reading Circle for their generous donation of $847 worth of books to the middle school and the high school. The Reading Circle was established in 1926 to assist in reading and screening children's literature each year. And then we ended up having our Hays High chess team win the Concordia tournament this last weekend. It was their first win, and due to the team's number of participants, they were able to take 2 teams. The second team won 3rd place overall in the tournament. And all the chess team members from Hays High placed individually. The chess club is sponsored by Aaron Holder.
Is that all you have?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
That's it.
Okay. Next is the report of the superintendent.
I wanted to end up sharing, I had the fortune of going to the National Elementary and Secondary Education Act Conference. That was just this last week. In going there, I was able to go to several different sessions that were very impressive. Some of them were motivation leads to innovation. Another was leaders coming together, growing your own teachers in high poverty, high minority schools. Another one was leadership for equity-based multi-tiered systems of support in high-need schools. Best practices for family engagement in alternative and traditional education settings. Create connections through collaboration to help students overcome fear and maximize their success. Now, all of those were very informational. They were very helpful, but to Mr. Bonner, his presentation on motivation leads to innovation was really exceptional. It was, he is an elementary teacher, and he ended up just his message, which I heard the message throughout the conference. The message ended up being largely, you have to have relationships with the families. You have to have relationships with the kids to really see success. And he was really dynamic. It was wonderful how he shared it. Others shared it as well, but not quite with the personality that he had in sharing it. And I'd say that was kind of confirms, reaffirms what we've been working on here of identifying that our individual buildings, as well as then at the district level, is identifying relationships is so important for our success in our schools. He had some amazing stories to share, and they tie right into things that we hear just here at home, locally, of how significant the relationships are in getting students to perform, to really try, and also that relationship with families, to have them trust and link into the schools of really trying to help out and be part of that. So it was a great message. Maybe about it. The best part of the conference was, again, our own school, O'Laughlin, being recognized and being on stage receiving that national recognition. So it was wonderful having representation there, and I would say that was a wonderful experience that I was able to attend. I've never been to a Title I. Previously, they were called Title I conferences, and they have changed that title. But this would be my first conference going to of a Title I conference. It was really quite an experience. They have it was nice that it was at Kansas City, so it made a national conference much more accessible, I would say.
Have any questions for John? Okay. Next, we'll move on to the consent agenda, which,
To approve the consent agenda.
you don't want me to read it?
I can read it.
Okay, I thought I had to read it. Someone told me I had to read it. All right, do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. All right, moving on to old business. Before we move on, I apologize. We have a retirement that I'd like to acknowledge. Lila Montgomery. She has 7 years of service with USD 489, and she'll be retiring this July. So thank you for her service. Thank you, Lance. All right, next on to the superintendent search. We did interview several qualified candidates, and we extended an offer to Mr. Ron Wilson, and he accepted the offer, and I have a signed contract from him. So I need someone to move that we approve the signed contract.
I'll move that we approve the signed contract.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Adams, second by Board Member Bickle. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. Next thing is administrative contracts, and this is to include Shanna Dinkle, the Assistant Superintendent, and Chris Hip, Director of Special Education. I know, Greg, you had asked for some reviews of the staff, and I think John has something to report on that.
I can sure do that. I ended up getting feedback for Chris Hip, because although he is contracted through USD 489, he ends up serving the La Crosse School District, Ellis School District, and also Victoria School District. And in conversation with three other superintendents, they have found his connection in those districts to be extremely helpful. He is well liked. They feel like he is making the connections that is needed to move ahead and develop or grow a stronger special ed cooperative for this area. They were very, I'd say, very pleased 4 months ago when we went through the first evaluation. In this second process, in the last week of pulling information, I was getting as much or more. Of course, you have 4 more months of gathering that, and they are very pleased with his interpersonal skills of working with people, and also of having a vision of what our cooperative should be looking like in the future. So that part was very, very good. With Shanna Dinkle, I can share that it is not hard to gather information when you go around the district and try to, not just a matter of keep up in trying to observe where she is, because she does a fantastic job of getting to the different buildings, her involvement with her observations and that she ends up doing, and then her leadership skills with so many different pieces at the district level of trying to make the school district better. She is, I would have to say, the very best curriculum and instruction leader that I have worked with in the other districts that I've worked in as well. So I feel very, very comfortable in making that recommendation that both of their contracts be extended. I would also add, I still believe, I know I had said this sometime earlier, I still believe that there needs to be more discussion at some point of the consideration of 2-year contract. I find that it's deserving, it should exist, and if it for whatever reason is not to exist, then we definitely need to move the action up sooner, because February is later than it really should be. It should be a couple months sooner to allow them choices if they were not going to be offered a contract.
Yeah, makes sense.
Thank you.
So at this time, we need to have a motion to approve or to move forward with the approval of the administrative contracts for Shannon and Chris for the 2019-2020 school year.
I'll move to approve the administrative contracts for Shanna Dinkle, Assistant Superintendent, and Chris Hip, Director of Special Education for the 2019-2020 school year. I'll second.
It's been moved by Board Member Adams, second by Board Member Walker. Is there any discussion?
I don't want to, what I was referring to on reviews of these is that we would have an opportunity to review their performance evaluation tools of discussions. And while I don't have any issue moving forward on this, I just think in the future that's really what we need to do. But I'm fine moving forward tonight as we are, but I just think it should be different.
And I want to speak also to the issue. I believe that we should do that, but maybe what we might do is consider this within our policy to be sure that we do it, as well as not just the reviews being done in a more timely fashion, so we have them a month or two before we consider the vote, but also consider revisiting the idea of a 2-year contract. And I don't know if that's something we pick up at the board retreat in July or where. But I don't think, yeah. So if we make note to bring that back to the board retreat, share that with the incoming, with the new superintendent Wilson in Taiwan, that's an issue that some of us would like to visit, but particularly the evaluation process formally.
Agreed.
Any other discussion?
Good.
Okay. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. Next item for old business is driver's education and summer school fee approval.
Actually, not much has changed from the last meeting that we had. There was the conversation of up to $50 being pulled from that, and it being that much less for fees this coming year. The discussion at the last meeting had pulled it to $25 instead of $50, and that's what is being presented this evening. And the summer school fee, even in talking at the last meeting and even at this point, was being suggested to stay the same. No change.
Make a motion to approve the driver's education and summer school fees as presented.
Second the motion.
It's been moved by Board Member Bickle, second by Board Member Adams. Any discussion?
I just have a question with some information we've received recently as to potential shortfalls in the budget. Is this the time to make those reductions?
I would say that the shortfalls, if there are any, when we end up getting closer to the end of the year, this particular budget has money that flows into it. We don't utilize, we wish not, we don't want to be a moneymaker for this particular process. That was never the intention. So can $25 less on these fees end up keeping this program running successfully? And the answer is yes, it can. And the idea is trying to make it so that we are not building up the amount in that particular budget line.
The driver's ed, though, is completely self-funded, though, right? We're not having to feed it or anything.
Right.
That's what Bruce said.
That's what I was thinking.
Well, Lance, it's making money.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I know
It's
you've
not
got the other
just
one.
self-funded, but it's making money. Actually, I know the numbers that was being shared, but just a year ago, 2 years ago, I think it was close to $80,000 that was in that. And so we've been trying in different ways to utilize that money, but that's the reason why. And it was actually a suggestion by our auditor to do this.
And then he also, if I remember right, he extended things a little bit this coming year. And
Right.
some of that to try to
That's right.
bring that down, correct?
Yes.
And just a question, how many, because I can't recall, how many are out of district versus in district students?
I think he did say a number, and I'm
That's
sorry.
okay, it's not important for the motion, just I'm curious because the point that was brought up is that
It's needed.
there aren't enough drivers ed programs.
My guess is 40. I don't know if that was correct or not, but it's not just one or two. There's a number of students that come in.
And do we have capacity if more were to want to come in, or are we at capacity number of students?
When I talked to Bruce on that, he felt that if we wanted, we could grow this program even more. We're not trying to grow it. We're not wishing to find more teachers during the summertime. So, no, I think capacity, we're there, but it can, if we tried, we could probably pull in more. And
You wouldn't have to work very hard.
right. The other part of that is we could also, just like we could shut down offering it to the surrounding area if the numbers within ended up getting larger that we we felt we just could not. We're able to really attend to a number of the needs of the closer districts around us too.
Well, I guess part of what I'm looking at and dealing with some things that I've had to there is a real problem within the state of Kansas for adequate instruction, and even worse, to have any way to get teachers who can do the instruction. So I would just, and I speak in favor of the motion, although I could see, but I'd like to, if we have that much surplus, to invest in it, either to look at some plans of like maybe we do want to expand it a little bit to grow, or more to service, because I think there is I'm sure there's a physical limit to how many people would drive in for that training, but I think we're seeing the demand because it just isn't the training around. And that may be something to do to help fund it, and if possible, look what it would cost to expand another instructor or whatever it may be. So it is a cost basis, it's taking care of itself. But just thinking about this motion, but looking ahead and also how to reinvest maybe in driver's ed materials. I was talking to somebody today who said, be sure that whoever your driver's ed teacher is, teach kids about blind spots, because their spouse is a semi-truck driver and is concerned about that. And so maybe there is some investment back into the surplus, whether it's training with National Highway Safety Association, whatever it may be sure that we are raising the bar to have extremely safe students out there driving. But those are just some thoughts about if we have a surplus, let's put it to work in a creative, positive way.
I just want to be clear that we can use that money anywhere. It doesn't have to only go to driver's ed. So if there is a surplus, and I'm not opposed to looking first at driver's ed related things, but if that was my only point. If we have a surplus there and we're going to be short in other areas, why not look at those before it's easier to leave it and adjust later than to cut it and then try and figure out where the money's going to come from after you've already cut the fees and you're now sitting on the eve of summer or middle of summer and that opportunity's gone.
And that point needs to be understood, because that was a question asked of the auditor, is our intention to make money with this program? The answer was no at that point. That was not the intention as far as using it to make money. And that's where the suggestion came as far as how to work from that. So we need to probably have that discussion too, if there is the need in this area. It's just a matter of make some changes. It would change the driver's ed program to do that.
I think the January 14th board meeting, it was recommended we reduce it by $50. So this one's 25.
And when we discussed it and talked about it.
Just 25 is the intermediate, because some of the concerns about, well, let's not leave ourselves short, and if gas prices go up or whatever else. We've benefited from lower gas prices over the last 4 years, which isn't much, but it's something there.
Any other discussion?
Summer fees and driver's ed are together, but we can't.
It was just,
Yeah, I mean, it's.
they made the motion already.
Friendly amendment, too.
Yeah.
Well, I think I've made my point clear where I'm at. I think if somebody wants to amend it and anybody else is supportive of that, great. If not, I think we vote on the motion. So.
I don't think others heard what Paul said here. Paul ended up identifying, he felt that there should be two different motions, one for the driver's ed and the other should end up being for the summer school.
We do want to look into the other.
But
We'll table that portion. I think it's just a matter of whether we want to leave it at the recommended amount or leave it where it was, or I mean, I guess we can explore it further, but
I believe that the $25 off, we are still going to be healthy. Actually, I am confident the numbers that we had looked at, $50 would work. We didn't just come up with the number. We looked at that actually, and you got to understand that Mr. Rupp does not want to not have enough money going into a program, so he was very much involved in identifying 50. 25 is very safe. That came from the meeting at last. It just came from thoughts of the board. It wasn't based on really looking at what the needs are on what they're going to be purchasing. And so I'm saying $25 is a very safe amount to consider. And for what your motion was, I'd say it's very safe to go ahead and act on it. If you want to pursue the program itself, that's really even a different, you can still do that. You can do that a month from now, 3 months from now, of considering it to be different. But that's pretty much a different direction than what our motion is about anyway. That's not what we're addressing. We're addressing fees is what this evening is about.
Right. I will say it's consistent to lower the fees, since we've said and have been trying to lower fees where they
Right.
are. So, I mean, I think I feel comfortable with this motion as it is, but I think the point of Board Member Short, towards very well made, is that the future and planning, I think, again, comes back to it. Particularly, we see what this is, and there's also a limbo period that we have where it may be a year to 2 years before any new teachers can be trained. So there is some opportunity for this team to grow. That comes out.
Well, I guess if we're still in the discussion stage, I'm prepared to vote for this as it is. So this is my 2 cents.
I would echo Board Member Schwartz and Board Member Adams as far as I would like to at least see us look into it though and see if with the
Yeah, well,
overages, if we
yeah.
can use that for other areas though, especially if there is going to be shortfalls with the budget, so.
Yep. I agree.
Any other discussion? Okay, I will call for the vote then. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 6-1. All right, next is the Oak Park Medical Complex update.
We were able to end up sharing with you the plans that are really complete at this point. The plans of what has been worked on has included maybe up to 6 people at a time when we've had our meetings. The issue, we have new locks on the buildings, and for everybody to understand, there's 4 buildings. One of the buildings is still being in use. It's in process of them moving, but we have 3 buildings that have locks on it, which really are, at this point, secures that we have those buildings to work with. The information that Donna is in need of, even with the grantors, is complete, as I understand it, except for one item, and that has to do with the budget. The budget they've worked on, we've worked with it the last couple weeks. I was really with hopes this last week of having that final budget and did not receive it. So I'm still in process, total belief that we would be getting it this week. Upon getting it, we would be seeing the beginning of the demolition, the walls that are going to be some of the walls that are going to be knocked out, and that hopefully existing. I mean, it's possible next week, and still next week is behind the timetable that we were hoping. Starting this process of going into the buildings and starting that work was a little bit compromised with a number of things. One of the items ended up being the environmental site assessment. We did get that finished just a couple weeks ago. So that was a big project. It took outside source coming in and completing. We end up having, we've had discussions specifically with the shelter. We've had discussions specifically with the playground as to where that would go and how the runoff would be affecting where the playground would go. I would say that most of those discussions have got us to the point where we are ready to start. I mean, we would like to go ahead and get started, but we need to end up having within the budget some contingency, and that's what they were working with, is trying to have that finished at this point. Also, another point for the board to be aware of is the concern that with one building still not ready to step into because of the occupants has not left yet. That happens to be, and I'd have to say by chance, because I don't think it was a concerted effort to make sure that that was the building that would end up housing Munger, the Munger program that comes. But with that building being the Munger program, Munger is a full-year program. It goes during the summertime as well. And as far as the start time being August, when the rest of the schools end up starting, or if they ended up starting in October, it probably would make no difference for that programming for that particular. So it was nice to identify that basically the other three buildings are without a doubt more of a priority of getting complete before school starts than that fourth building.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Rusty has gone through there and they're planning to take out a lot of like cabinets and other type items. We're planning to kind of strip it a little bit beforehand, aren't we?
Yes, actually, the building has very nice cabinets in it. I mean, there's some very nice furnishings that exist, and the intent is to utilize as much of that as possible. So we've had our conversation of how they can be pulled and placed somewhere else in that facility, or taken, if need be, off-site while they get things finished before they come back and place that. We are trying very much to knock out as few of walls as we have to, utilize all the cabinets that we can, use all the plumbing, relocate bathrooms and sinks where there were bathrooms and sinks, trying to make sure that, budgetary reasons of just making it so that it can't. But in doing all of that, one of the real drives in this was trying to make sure that the classroom still had what you'd say space that was necessary, and have some equalization from classroom to classroom. The first draft that came out had a range where some classrooms, I believe, had 500 square feet, and another one 550, and another one had over 900. And we're saying, no, that's not what we want to see. And so they have done an admirable job of making sure that that has happened, and the square footage looks very good as you go through it. Now, some of the square footage, if you look at it, may be quite different, but understand some of these rooms are really utilized much different than other rooms as far as number of children. Some of these rooms may plan to only have 8 children in it, and that's all. So we're very pleased with what we have. It is complicated when you consider the needs being a bit different. And when I say needs, you're looking at special ed. You are looking at, I want to say the 4-year-old at risk along with Head Start, as being separate. But the way we've done it is we've incorporated them together anyway. So our 40 4-year-old at risk children get mixed in with the Head Start, and it's not really identifying one from the other. They're mixed in those classrooms. But there are two different programs that fund it, okay? Then you end up also having our pay program. And the pay program is at the high school, okay? And that's it's one room, but it's still a morning and an afternoon program. There's no intentions at this point of it becoming a full-day program. You know, it ends up tending to students in the morning and then a different group in the afternoon. Tina is in charge of that. I think most of you are aware of that. So we have, and then of course we have the other programming that exists, which would be the parents as teachers that's there. And it takes a lot of office space for a number of these services too. When you're looking at one section is mostly offices and conference space, it's because of that. If there is anything that has Donna probably worried a little bit at this point, it'd be storage. Again and again, and if you go into the other buildings such as Munger, of course is not at all being completely used. So they end up having plenty of space for storage. Then you go to Washington, and they even put a wall to cover the stage just a year or two ago, so that the whole stage it's just filled with storage as well. So we have been working. It doesn't show it all in this design, but we are trying very hard to make sure that there's plenty of storage for the programming there that they end up utilizing.
Could you just tell me a 4-pay classroom? I saw that. Remember.
Well, Tina Albers is at the high school, and she has a program there that ends up having, it's actually in the location. There was a space between the addition that has all of the woods and art, and there used to be an open space between that building and the main building. And then Head Start ended up providing a grant, much like they did just now, and ended up getting a sizable grant that provided the funds to connect the two buildings. Well, in connecting the two buildings, it provided space for, I think there's 3 classrooms there. One of them still has oven, have couches there. It was utilized for really a parenting space. And then across the hall are 2 different classrooms for the children. One she regularly uses, the other one's kind of an open space that they've used for indoor play. You know, that PE, I guess is what I'd say. And then just outside the back, if you ever drive around the back side of the high school, you'll see a little tiny playground that's fenced in, and in a corner on the back side of the building is right there. So that has been, the parents do pay tuition to go to school to take their children there. And those children that go, that tuition has been enough to end up running that program. I mean, it has been self-sufficient. This year, I would say, is the first year that the numbers have been, she was maybe 4 short. I mean, by the end, there was a handful short, and it made it pretty tight. You know, it ended up being, but she has had very good success of getting individuals who utilize that for a half-day preschool program. It is not driven in any way by Head Start or special ed, or it's unto itself. And it would be the same across the street in the new facility as well.
You want to have any questions for John at this point?
Will you give me some revised schedule? based on what you just shared?
Yeah, we did revise it once, and I think it's pretty close, but I should know this week, yeah, I'll be able to revise it and be much better off. We need that budget, and that would drive the rest of it.
And you've worked with Rush, I take it the furniture and things that will be moving from, because we don't have money to buy new furniture, so the move in the furniture is already coordinated within Rusty's schedule?
That's correct.
Okay.
Rusty he said that the way they had done that the last time was they utilized a moving company. And they did that very efficiently, and they worked that out very well within I think it was 2 days they were able to do that. So that would be the same intention coming up into probably August is when that would happen.
And that's within the budget?
We are planning that that's within the budget, yes.
Do we know what the budget is?
Well, the budget would be, we are working off of that 1.4 million, okay, which was for the renovation. And then we're working from that, the gift from the hospital, which it was nice they came at the last meeting, but that 500,000 on it. So 1.9 million is what the budget is. Now, the only thing that changes that possibly are 2 other grants that Donna has written. She wrote another grant that would help with financing the playground being moved, which could end up helping again with $150,000. And she also wrote another grant that could help with the shelters, which would end up also helping with that. So at the very least in this budget, it's 1.9, well, less than $2 million. At the most, you could add a couple $100,000 on top of that if those other grants came in.
So if we get the grants, the budget will be a couple $100,000 more?
It would end up helping with the contingency. We're trying not to do that the way they're putting together this budget without those grants. They have to at this particular point. So they're putting it together without it. But if we did receive it, certainly it allows us to look at it to see what would change.
Or reduce the 1.9 million and put that money back to other projects,
Well,
or not?
perhaps.
Perhaps.
Our problem with that to a degree is a matter of $500,000 was verbalized being intended for this project.
Yeah,
The other, the 1.4 has to be used for this, so it makes it, you say perhaps, I say perhaps it may be very, very hard to do that when that's the direction of what that money was to be used for.
But it will require,
We could pay off the debt
Yes,
with that money.
yes.
could also
That's
use,
still tied to essentially the project.
and the money that may come if the Washington property sale goes through, could also be available for that.
Yeah, well, yes.
It's a different piece altogether.
Altogether, yeah, but that $500,000 for Washington is going to be on the table. I really do believe it will be on your table at some particular point, and that would be an issue where you would have to decide what you want to do with that. It could immediately, and since I think that will be in the summertime, I'll throw it out right now. I would, if I was here, recommend that's what you would do, is use that $500,000 to pay down the debt that was used to end up buying that other property. There would be less interest over time that you'd be paying, and it certainly is tied to the same project. I mean, you're essentially using the same, the facilities to provide this programming is just being moved somewhere else, and it's still the facilities for providing this program. So I think that should be a strong consideration months from now when that happens. Okay.
Any other questions? All right, moving on to new business. I have a KISA accreditation update from John.
there is, there are many, many, many charts. Much information of looking at these surveys for the educator, for the parents, and for the students. And Sarah has worked very hard at putting these charts together and being able, but the information really is very helpful, because even if you have any criticism towards some of the questions on how they're asked, the benefit is this: they are the same questions asked 3 years in a row. We have data 3 years in a row of these particular questions to educators, to parents, and to students. And there's many of them. I mean, there's 60 questions to each group. If you go through them and look at them, some of them really don't give you a whole lot of meaning, but there's some that is a little bit awareness. You're looking at the change in a couple years, and basically it is helpful to look at these. The buildings, when you saw Paula's presentation earlier for Roosevelt, and you saw the pictures of them sitting at tables and working, some of this was that work of studying this and trying to make a determination of how this falls in line with what some of the needs are. Now, certainly they look at other data, such as the grades of children, the attendance for the children. They end up looking at discipline. They end up looking at all kinds of information. But these surveys have been very important in trying to gather information from, for instance, the students themselves and the parents, and trying to end up creating changes for school improvement by paying attention to this and really looking where the change is. I know you can end up going through it and may have had time to really compare things yourself. I try to answer any questions you have of it, but the intention was not a matter of breaking down this data tonight. The intent was to show this is what's been worked on the last several years when we talk about surveys. The surveys that are being utilized for our school improvement, this is just one tool. There are others, but this is one that, you know, takes some extra time, and from the standpoint of that extra effort of getting parents to step in and share what they think, this is what we're using to do that.
Having looked through all these and drinking 2 cups of coffee to make it through, I can say that. In the process, I guess what would be helpful is it looked like professional development. Well, I made a series of notes on this, but I guess what would be helpful is distillation of this to what are the key takeaways and key actions. And as I started looking at that, it's like, okay, well, it sounds like here's something we should really put our resources towards, because it would make a big difference. But I'd be interested in that distillation. I mean, some of these things seem like we're not getting any real change on. Some I've seen changes coming across that, like, wow, looks like we really focused on that as a win. And other things, nothing really was, I'm trying to recall, nothing really went the other way in any particular way. Distributions were there, but that would be very helpful, particularly as we begin to gear up, and with a new superintendent coming on board, this sort of information would be very useful.
Well, and I think I don't have that with me, but it exists, because
Okay.
that is what the buildings ended up going through. And I think you could go to any of the building principals, and they would be able to provide that even tomorrow, of saying these are the areas that we focused on, whether the information on the data that was showing an improvement or a lack of improvement, or whatever their reasoning was. They've identified many of these questions that they kind of stuck on to make their decisions as to how they want to improve.
Well, that would be useful having that to see.
Okay.
Because if we're moving towards data-driven decision-making or the use of data analytics, I think that would be, I'd like to see where the analysis is and where people have made an action. Because 3 years on some of this, there really is some trend. Some things have actually gotten better, some things no traction, some indicating where we should go even at the district level. But since most of this is by building, that would be very helpful.
And what Shanna is still working to do, I mean, to some degree, she's gathered this, but we have another district leadership team meeting that would be coming up, and this is still a process of taking all of our buildings, taking their points of reference, and we still have to funnel this into a district plan.
Okay.
So it's a matter that each one of those buildings have to be, I'd say, respected as to what they came up with, but then take it and try to mold it into a district plan of saying, but this is what our district is going to end up working with. That was something that you saw as well in Paula's presentation. She identified that the relationship and the relevance, but the difference is they broke it down as to areas within there. Each building may have really a little bit different path within their relationship, or a little bit different path within their relevance that they're going to work from. And they need to, because building to building may have truly different needs.
And I think it's good, because I admit I only looked at the district-wide pie graph initially, but you're right, that would be interesting to see, since although we have open enrollment, people can choose where to go.
Right.
There are cultures within each school that may indicate certain things. When it does come together, you said it'll be distilled into a district plan. At what point will the board be looking at that? Because I would go on the assumption that whatever plan comes forward, the school board would have to say, yes, we'll support that with the resources you need to make this happen.
Right. It has to come to you quite soon, because actually our visitation is in, I believe it's April. Okay. I don't know what date it is. It's April something, so.
April 29th?
Maybe so.
Okay.
But April is when that visitation is. And we've got to have that shared with the board and that before that, so.
So we should expect to see more in March.
Just like this.
Okay.
Very good.
All right. Yeah, I will say that it is nice to see this there, but it needs a distillation. It's a little.
Right.
Yeah. It's a lot of.
Or they're saying, I want the takeaways.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Next, we'll move on to the capital outlay resolution.
Okay, let's see, can you get the do you have the resolution in your hand, or is it coming up?
It's on the screen.
Okay. What you're looking at here is the resolution to renew the capital outlay mill levy for another 5 years. The past resolution has been 8 mills. I assume you'll want to continue with 8 mills. With this fund, we pay for all of our building maintenance. We also have lease purchases being paid with capital outlay funds, such as the middle school additions, as well as the middle school's HVAC. Included with those leases are the purchase of computers and some of our custodial salaries. We generate about $2.5 million a year in capital outlay fund. And of course, for it to continue, it has to be board approved. Certainly a key part of all of our operations here at USD 49.
So since we're already at 8, maxed out,
Yes.
really the only decision is we decide to lower it for any reason.
You could, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Or not.
But there has to be action, no matter what. You
Right,
have
has
to
to be
act
action.
on 8, yeah,
Yes.
or none, or
Have we
whatever.
done this every year?
Every 5 years.
Oh.
So I was like,
That's why I say I don't remember
I
it.
was like, I never remember this.
Yeah, I thought, well, this is great information. I've never seen it before. Okay, now I understand why I never saw it before.
So this will be coming up for adoption next meeting.
That's our intention.
Okay.
How many years have we had it at 8 mills?
what
I'll look that up.
I did not do the history to check that either, Mindy.
Okay.
I would assume with some of the conversations that I've had with others that it's been a long
Long
time
time.
at 8.
That's what I
More than 10? Okay.
Does anyone have any questions for Keith before the next meeting that he needs to?
And maybe the question's more complicated than this. You mentioned the things we're currently using it for. This comes back to some requests that have been made earlier about a long-range capital outlay plan to see, because we have, at this point, we've become very dependent on having this, but do we have in 5 years where that we're looking 5 years and we know how we'll spend this over the next 5 years? I guess looking for the longer term, look at finance.
The capital, I didn't bring it tonight, but I'll have it for you at the end of the month. The references that you'll look at each month as far as your capital outlay purchases, it shows you some leases that'll be falling off in the next few years. I've looked at Rusty's budget. He has things planned out based on what his budget is, and it's just depending on what would come up on down the road as far as what you'd like to see. So I don't have anything in my hands that's a 5-year plan,
But enough assurance that should we vote on it, whatever we approve, that's in action for 5 years unless something else changes.
it's in action for 5 years.
Okay. And so I guess that's just some assurances that we have at least an indication of how, if we're going to tax the community, that how that's going to be invested back into the physical plant or any of these items that are listed here.
I can tell you that you probably couldn't operate without the mill levy.
I didn't figure we could, but I want to be sure that we communicate that to
Sure.
the patrons, that, this is money invested back into keeping things going and improving where we can.
Absolutely, and we'll talk about that when I bring them.
All right.
And if I can add to Paul's statement, the issue too is you have identified, the board has identified the desire to redirect some of that capital outlay money. And when I say redirect, $300,000 being utilized for salaries.
Right.
Okay? Like to take that away and not be using capital outlay, those 8 mills to pay salaries. 300,000 of 2.5 million would be nice if it was right back to utilizing for facilities instead of salaries. We have become a bit tied in. When you did that several years ago, it becomes then hard to back off of that because you become a bit dependent to it. But we would like to do that. The other thing is the leases that were identified. Yes, those leases come off, and boy, all of a sudden there's quite a bit more capital outlay money that's available when that happens. The question is, do we have another project that's going to be immediate to then take that process of that lease? Or is that money going to be available for really that utilization? For any of you to think that we end up having 2.5 million that's being put right back into improving our facilities, that is not true. Actually, it's more like half of that amount, it may be less than half of that is being truly utilized for improving our facilities year to year, because we have the other already tied into leases, to salary, and
Buses.
yeah. So just, if that's been, and I agree with Keith completely, his statement of, I do not believe at this point in time, in the next few years, this district would function without the 8 mills. The 8 mills in this district is needed.
And I'm not questioning that. I just want to be able to communicate maybe more clearly to folks. As we begin to look at other facility needs, we should be able to say, we're using this effectively, but we need some additional support to make large-scale improvements. Because, as you said, we use it for HVAC. We've done really, Rusty has come up with a great plan. We've done a lot of good things that are lost I think sometimes get lost in the shuffle. So
Sure.
that's the only reason I'm asking for it. I don't question the need, but I want to be sure we communicate that.
Okay.
Keith, I didn't have this question prepared, and you can blame Paul for talking longer, and it just came to me, and so you're probably not going to like what I'm going to ask you, but is it possible to come back and give us an idea? Because John made a comment too about in this district, and I'm just curious why in this district we have to do the things we do, and maybe everybody's doing that, but you know, things such as computers and salaries and whatever else we're taking out, what others are doing and how they're getting away with it. I know that's a pretty big task, and maybe I guess I'd just like to hear some things about what we're doing that's different than everybody else, and how do we fix that. I know that 1 year is probably not going to fix that, but
You can do that.
Are you thinking like a comparison to us of similar sized districts?
well, no, I don't want to go through that level. If you compared us to one district, it would be a lot of work, I believe, but I just think if we have some idea of, here's how others might be doing some things, and I don't know that it needs to be a direct one-to-one comparison.
Well, I was just thinking, I mean, I'd imagine they'd have their capital outlay stuff similar to us on their website with agendas or anything else.
Well, but the reason why I say that is because we've had several budget or financial meetings in the last couple weeks trying to understand it, just as you kind of stated, Greg. The issue is a matter, we need to understand where is the money really going? You know, where is why is Hayes, even as we're better off than we were 6 years ago, why is Hayes seem to have seemingly harder time of managing, of having that money to do other projects or do other things? Now, there's an answer to that, and we've been trying to work on that, and I think we can definitely have something put together to share with the board so that you have our thoughts as to what we're looking at, what those numbers show.
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Next new business item is the designation of negotiating agents, and we're supposed to consider the agents for the 2019-2020 school year contract.
Yeah, it is amazing. We're already at that point of we really need to be considering the negotiating process. And in negotiating, to make assumption that Bill and I would continue to be the two agents for the board, that's fine, but that would be just an assumption because the board has not really identified that. What we put in this in our discussion is perhaps Bill, myself, but I think Keith might be also identified with this. The three of us could be the agents representing the board. Now, it can be whomever you decide. We threw those names out just as a possibility, and believe me, we're not going to fight you if you want to end up arranging a different way to do it.
Okay.
But we do need to know very soon who those agents, who's going to be identified by the board in negotiations.
And this is something you want us to vote on next time, correct?
At the very latest, we need to know soon. And forgive me, I am not saying, because I really don't know. The way things are kind of in a turmoil still at the state level, if we're going to have information in a month that's really going to help us move ahead. We may not start true negotiations until a bit later than what we've tried to do in the last year or two. But it'd be good to go ahead and have those individuals identified sooner than later. So if you have any ideas and want to share it right now, fine. If it's a matter of you need a couple days to think on it and share, that's fine. But I just want to make sure that if Keith and Bill and I make a team that will work, fine. If a board member needs to be on that as well, if one of us need to be off, however it ends up being, we just need to know that combination that you would be suggesting, and hopefully at the next meeting.
Yeah, okay. I'd say first blush, the one thing is I think you're right, this negotiation will go later because we won't know what we really have to work with unless we agree in principle to what percentages may be. But we don't know, and I don't think we will know, but there won't be any problem later to say if we had the superintendent on there, we just say we're going to change superintendents on negotiating.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And I think it would be worthwhile to have at least one board member as part of the negotiating team.
I voted not be the board
I'll
president.
volunteer. I'm going to volunteer. Let me pick. There's 6 other people. I'm just throwing this out as a discussion point. I'm not making a motion or recommendation.
Well, and let me add something to that, Paul. At every meeting that we had the last time, I think that's safe to say, we had 1, 2, or 3 board members present.
Right.
And that was without them identified as the agents.
But I think having an official designation as an agent would give more authority to that.
Well, that's true, and that's fantastic if there's someone who can truly commit. I mean, that's the important thing. If they're identified as an agent, that's a little different because then we kind of expect them to be at each one of those meetings.
Right, I understand that.
It's a lot of time.
I
I will throw that out there. And Lance showed up a lot more often than I did.
I think it could be healthy to at least talk about the option of adding board members or specifically designating board members to it.
All right.
So we'll come back to this
Right.
the next board.
Can we talk about this in an executive session at some point?
I think we should tonight
Probably no.
because we won't have another
That's
meeting
fine.
before the next time.
Yeah.
So we'll include
All
that.
right, Bill?
Is that okay?
To do what now?
Talk about this
Discuss
in
who our
executive
agents
session.
are going to be in executive session.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we'll do that here in a moment. Before that, discussion by board members and any agenda requests.
I do have one. I just wanted to thank the board for all the time it's invested in the hiring of the new superintendent. I specifically wanted to thank Chris and Shanna for their time. I know they took a lot of time out of their day, even though they were here anyway, but that then pushed off everything they had scheduled for that day, and I know that they did put in a lot of extra hours. And finally, and most importantly, to Sarah, because I know that she put in a whole bunch of time to make our lives easier and the candidates' lives easier, making sure there were meals for everybody, both at lunch and dinner, and not just doing that by catering everything, but by spending your own time. So I just wanted to thank you and we really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. I had one thing, John, on the calendar for tomorrow is the labor management meeting. Is that correct? Who, do you need me there? Who?
Well, I will just say, just for the rest of the board to, well, you know a little bit about it, but in our negotiated agreement, it identifies that there is to be meetings in between the negotiations process, and look like there'd be three to four meetings. Now, that hasn't existed since I've been here, so either I dropped the ball, but it was never requested either, and now it's being requested. The individuals that are to participate in that meeting is identified as actually the negotiators, you know, for the teachers as well as other. So I intend to be there. Keith intends to be there. I never did ask Bill to be present. That was not really at this point. But if there was a board member that wanted to attend,
I'll be there.
that's fine. It'll start at 3:45. It's kind of that open session. I have a list of ideas to share. I'm sure they will have a list of ideas. And then the second meeting that we have will probably be a bit more, there may be an agenda at the next one then. The way it is
3:45.
going into, I'm
Here?
sorry?
Just planning on being there too.
Is it here or is it the next room? Where's the location?
I
What is
think we had placed it in the room
All right.
next door.
Somewhere in this area.
Somewhere in this building, all right, I'll
Yeah.
hunt it. I got an announcement to you. Okay. I just want to, I'm not sure where this goes in the whole agenda, but I want to just report to the board and the people listening that I attended a Laughlin Site Council meeting on February 4th, and I want to give a little feedback on that meeting. The folks are working on the KISA process. Laughlin's identified that they need to address or work on the changing demographics of the school and to dealing with traumatized children. And they've identified helping parents help their children. They know that there's a lot of kids, some kids, quote was, some kids cannot come to school ready to learn. So they're working on not just how to educate kids, but also educate parents. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so for the executive session, John, you and Keith had an item, right, for this evening?
No, the only possible that was listed for executive session, if there was any need for my evaluation, if you had any discussion.
Okay,
That
I
was-
thought there was
Yeah,
another
and
item.
I don't know if that even came, if there's
Okay.
a need, so.
Okay, so
Nope.
then we will go to executive session. Yeah, it's just, okay. So I move the Board of Education recess into executive session under the following exemption to the Kansas Open Meetings Act pursuant to the non-elected personnel matter exemption. The subject to be discussed during executive session is appointees of negotiating team. The open session.
That would be, if I could correct you,
Sorry.
that would be pursuant to employer-employee.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And not non-elected.
Okay, correction then. So pursuant to employer-employee negotiations exemption, and we will come back here, what do we need, like 15 minutes? So we'll come back at 8:05. And just to include the Board of Education. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0.